Hello, DGBA Poison Point. It is me, Vinny, your admin, and I am here all alone today. Besides having Brother Quang here, who is recording for me, he might make a cameo with some one-liners at some point. But yeah, uh, sadly not joined by Slick. So for that, fuck you, pardon the eruption. And that Chimchar plushie you see has probably the ugliest nose I've ever seen. Anyways, with that, we'll get into the actual PRs, and these should hopefully be quick. Going on to our 18th place team, we have Spoink. Unfortunately, Spoink's draft for me is just not doing it. I'll start off with the positive. So the positive is I think this is a solid, bulky offensive draft, and the top three, especially, all force distinct Terra types with Terapagos Ghost, Ogerpon Grass, and Zapdos Electric, and they can kind of punish for the others, mostly Ogerpon Zapdos, is a good core. But I think the team kind of falls off a bit after that. You'll notice this team doesn't have a fairy resist, which like normally Gudra can act as one in like for like most fairy types, but specific ones like Anam and Val, I think can just run this team and are really scary matchups, especially when you're forced to fight a Valiant so that no one fights too. Um, I do think that if this team had a better like hazard game with a better spiker other than Ogerpon, because I think Ogerpon on this team being like the only major physical threat outside of like Breloom, which isn't going to come every week. If Ogerpon wasn't forced to be the only spiker here, and this team could play around hazards or T spikes, it would be able to take advantage of its bulk better. And then I think as well Zapdos here could be kind of pressured. Again, I don't think Gardevoir is the best fighting check in the world, so Zapdos is really pressured on fightings, and if it goes down, I think fightings can run house on this team. And then also, I think the revenge killing in this team could struggle a little bit because you're reliant on bundle a lot here. Otherwise, you're not really having any great scarfers. I mean, you have Breloom, Gardevoir again, but again, these are just mons I don't think are coming every week, and that's why I don't rate this team very highly. That's all. Also, the Donphan pick for me, it just wasn't doing it as the ground. I think first off, you're committing to Donphan so early when you already have a premier spinner, which Donphan's gonna get walled by the same stuff anyways. It's kind of just a rock spot here. Don't really love it. So
For a
that's all.
team called Guz, I'm sure as hell not seeing any lords.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to OG Albina, or five. Hopefully, I pronounced that right correctly. This team. First off, I've seen I've seen this structure before. It was run by L5 at World Cup 1, I believe. A lot of these ones was like the Dio, D-Knight, Swampert, I think Gweez. Um, this team for me, I'm gonna get to the struggles right away. I think the speed is one of the primary struggles I see. So like the team does have not bad priority, but opposing teams can just run free bulk versus this team because your speed after Dio is an Infernape, and then it drops to Dango, D-Knight, Bolt, which a lot of times they're gonna want to run bulky anyways. So if you're not bringing Infernape, your speed and revenge killing is kind of a struggle, which again, you have Dio, which can revenge kill as well, but it's also the spiker here for allowing this team to break down stuff. But again, the Dio is just going to want to do so much in that world, and I don't think it's going to be able to. I think the team could lack a little momentum in some cases, mostly if your Bolt is like set up win conning, because then it's just slow pivot pert, and I think Infernape can't really afford to click priority a lot of or removal. Or sorry, not removal. What am I saying? Momentum a lot of the times. So there's that. And then lastly, the Sableye pick for me here was just kind of redundant because I don't think you need it to do anything in particular. Like util wise, I think you have some of those ones. Like it can free up your Dengo or your Deoxys. It's just I don't think it was worth the 6 points. I think there are some cool picks here. Like I like the Terrabonnet for 4 points. Glad someone going for that. And I think if this team can play offensively, it could just run teams over with its pure stats from like D-Knight, Bolt, and Dango. But if not, I think it's going to struggle to play a slower game.
This team is so not demure.
Great. Okay, that moves us on to Turk. I think this team actually started out pretty strong with the top 3 booster core. I think Tinkaton's also not a bad fit. And I can kind of see the merit to Rilla as well. Where it falls off to me is afterwards with T-Tar Ments mostly. These low tiers just aren't doing it for you. Non-Terra Ments I don't think is very good. And then you have T-Tar again. I don't really get why it's here. I think Obviously, it can be there with Houndstone, but you're bringing those two mons over some of your top 5, which I just don't think is going to be worth it, unless it's just god awful Rilla matchup. Um, Again, something this team is missing as well is spikes. I think if you have spikes, this team could just chip shit down, and it has so many ways to revenge kill and break between the top 3, and I think Rilla has options too here to support that. It's just I don't like the non-Terra mons this team supported it with, and that's really why this team is so low, is because the quality of those guys just isn't doing it for me. It's like, yeah.
This shit a movie.
Okay, that moves us on to Nozermat, which this is the best that I think Nozermat has ever done in PRs, which he did get 15th last season, but there's 2 more coaches. This team arguably probably could have been lower, but I am trusting the vision. I think this is clearly a pretty big setup spam team around the Terramons, the Terra Trio, and you also have stuff like RM that can set up. Uh, and the team does have the support to support the setup with the different hazards, the removal options, the countless ways to get screens up. Um, Now, where some of the problems for me come is some of the speed on this team. Obviously, you have Treads, Moon, but after that, your speed kind of. I mean, I guess you do have Zapdos, but the speed generally you have a lot of slower mons on this team. Um, their spin blocker here is a Poltegeist. When I see a pretty hazard reliant team or like a team that wants to play through hazards, I don't like that your spin blocker is a Poltegeist. And then I think this team could end up being quite like setup gimmicky reliant. Like there is some options for pure like breaking power here, but most of the time you're going to want to set up to win games, and that can leave you vulnerable to your opponents countering, prepping around that pretty easily. Otherwise, I think this is a team with Nozermat that I could see him doing really well with.
This team looks like that it would go 7-1 in quick feed this season.
Valid. Okay, that brings us on to Kaif. So the first thing that I thought when I saw this team was it just just where's the round 1 mon? Like I get the Tinglu Petch value, but end of the day, I mean getting round 3 Gren does kind of make up for it, but uh that was the start for this team in my opinion of the struggle. I do think this team has very good hazards and momentum core built up that it can just cycle its opponents down with. Beyond that though, I think something that you'll notice some criticisms of these teams, these Booker teams, is the removal options. I don't love that your removal is just a lug, so you're forced into boots or to be taking the hazards chip when you want to be playing that slower game. I think a good water type can pressure this team really hard because it's really just Ogerpon there. Uh, I do think as well, like your actual ways to win the game are your 2 Terramons more than likely. A lot of times it's your Gren and your Ogre and potentially Crown, but it's not Terra, so it can't as reliably win. But those are your water resist. That's a lot of time going to be revenge killing. So I think this team could struggle to maneuver its win cons while revenge killing at the same time. And at that same time, I think the breakers on this team are not the greatest either. And we're just looking at raw stats here. There's no clear huge breaker that I think will just get through the opponent's team. I think this team has to play slow and chip through its opposing team before it loses, and then get one of its fast win cons like Ogre or Gren in with their speed boosts, get the battle bond up, and kill the opponent. Like I think it's pretty linear in the way that it has to play that.
Looks like this team needs to take a trip to the slopes.
Nice. Okay, that moves us on to A12. You'll notice this team does have a round 7 Garchomp, which I actually think was kind of a bait here, which like on paper maybe like it's the ground, the team didn't have a ground, whatever, it didn't have hazards, Garchomp good here, but this team is no spin block for Chomp, which Chomp's best sets this gen are just straight up hazard stack. Um, Again, also you're slotting it onto a team that I think was going to play around removal otherwise with Corv when it wanted it, and your removal with Chomp is Defog, and this team could have a bit of a lack of immediate offense because you do obviously need the Palafin turn to get in. Again, if you could run offensive Chomp, but a lot of times it doesn't do that. And then Apple wants to set up, and Valiant a lot of times in like on this team, it's probably gonna win con, or it's gonna be your revenge kill like speed option. So it's not gonna be like a set that can insta break. Otherwise, I do think this like bulk structure has the ability to function and win games. It just has some clear flaws in the way that it wants to play the game to me, which is why it's here. And it's very similar to the next team that we'll see, which I just like a bit more than it.
I couldn't come up with a creative comment for this one. I really do fuck with the Crawdaunt though.
True. Big Crawdon. Okay, this leads us into Spy's team, which I believe has a lot of the same issues, where it's a Chomp team without the reliable spin blocker. Which when you also have Meow on top of it, you have some of the best hazards in the game. Uh, I think that Crown on this team is also really pressured. I believe it's the flying swap, and it's gonna have to swap into. There was another typing that I'm forgetting, but it does have to swap into a decent amount of things here, and I think this team it's for the most part, it's clear win con. Like you can win the game by revenging and other options as well, but Crown is the one to me that like stands out, especially when you're terroring it. So I didn't love that Crown had a ton of pressure. Um, and then also another team without like the spin removal with your Chomp. Like I think these teams can definitely function. It's just they're gonna be not playing optimally around their Chomps. But otherwise, the Mon quality on this is really solid, especially the um, top six. And I think Bro, Luna could like definitely cheese some stuff, and I think the double ground here actually works, mostly if you're terroring your Luna, which then allows Crown to do what it needs to do here. And Pheasant can kind of back it up, so I can see this team working for sure.
Yukon Huskies.
Okay, well this gets us to our first fun slide, which we'll start with this logo is tiny as hell, so I just decided to spam it. And there is a Pikachu hidden in there if anyone wants to play along while I talk about this team, and then after I do that I'll reveal where the Pikachu is. And if you get it right,
I
you
can
don't
see
win
it.
anything. Well, you can delete it later and tell me where it is. Okay, first off, this team. So this team was one at first that I thought I would absolutely hate, but the more I looked at it, I don't think it's that bad. Like it's not great, but not bad. The first thing that stood out to me again with this team is you have really good priority with your top three Rilla, Talonflame as options there. Um, and that can kind of shore up one of the main weaknesses of this team, which is its speed, because it's only mons above 100 are Dio, Talonflame, which are not like really speed tier forcers. The team does have the like a good amount of bulk to be able to play without needing to fully rely on that speed. But again, when your opponents run bulk on you for free, it's not the best. Uh, Also, I mean, obviously the flexibility of the two Terra Caps is nice, but at the end of the day, one of them is gonna not really be a Pokemon every single week, uh, which is not great. I think this team could have played around it, like it could have been a better Hazards team. Like you have the Dio option for Hazards, and I don't think this team is like pigeonholed into using Dio in any specific way, but your spin blocker is a Haunter. So there's that. And then that does also leave this team kind of vulnerable to T-spikes a bit. And this team's special offense is basically solely, I mean, Dio can be, but it's mostly around Bolt, so that can be a bit exploited. But I think, again, this is the kind of team that I think does have like the raw power and Mons to be able to like brute force and muscle through any of these like flaws that you may see. Anyways, so do you want to reveal where the Pikachu is among us,
I
Blaster?
see him. I
You know,
see him right there. It's
you
that
do
see
see you
it's
do
that
see the
little
eye.
eyeball. That little
Yep. So if you
eyeball in the middle. It doesn't look the same as the glasses, but it's a little Pikachu
so
right there.
that is in fact where the Pikachu is. So if you spotted that, good job.
Leave a like if you spotted that. Leave a like for Terra for Giraffe.
Yeah, true. Terra Farig is cool. I've seen that guy used before.
That
I
dude's
think
awesome.
I am surely hoping it is not Terra when you have a Bolt and a Shifu rapid with Terra though.
But think of the
Anyways,
flex.
that brings us to a cooler Terra team, which is Zooch. Okay, so this is one of the quite a few bulky teams you have in the league. You have Kaif's team, and there's one you'll see later that's going to come up. Which this team is obviously going to be AIDS as hell to break when you have Tinglu, Aloe, G-King, Sinistra, Fortress. Um, and this team's hazards are insanely strong with a good spin blocker to support it. That leads me into some of the weaknesses of this team. So I do see kind of a disconnect here with the Val Boulder. I mean, they can definitely clean and win the game once you've done chipping. It's just they don't really break for you here, so your breaking options are a little more awkward. I mean, maybe one of them could break in each matchup. And defensively, the whole team is grounded, which when your removal is Fortress, which is like it's kind of this gen, you're not going to always get the best removal. You're not going to be able to spin block that easily a lot of times, or spin that easily a lot of times. Sorry. So I do see this team having to run boot spam a lot, and that's like not the worst. It's just it does kind of put you into that hole here. And obviously, again, when your win cons are your revenge killers, that can make like prepping around with Valiant and Boulder not the easiest because they're also your breakers. And then I do think as well this team could have gotten slightly better knockoff mons to play around for the hazard stack. Because I think this team's strongest thing is its hazard stack. Unironically though, this Scyther could actually do things here because it is the team's ground resist, and if the team wants to ever like remove through not spin, I guess Scyther can do that too. So you know, Terra Scyther's time to shine.
Experienced and knowledgeable. Watch a lot of Showdown. Not great at building. Colby 2D, 2025.
Okay, zero clue what that one was about. So we have the first mascot pick team, which is Paddocks with the Big Haxorus. So I think this team, what it does well is the top three, especially, and you can also kind of tack Ogre on with that, is that you have a really good offensive momentum breaking core, so all those mons get momentum and they can break for each other, and they force like specific Terra types that the other ones are good into. So I really liked that. And I think that the Grimmsnarl Rotom especially have the ability to support that offense, give them the screens to be hella aids to take down, give them the momentum. Um, where I saw this team a little bit more iffy was your only rocker being Tread's not great, especially if you wanted to be your like removal option. It doesn't really free it up. Like it can do that, it's just not the most ideal. I think it'll be fine. I also think this team is a little fire weak because your resist is essentially just Palafin, because Axis is not a real resist. So your Palafin's, if the fire type has Wisp or like anything that can burn, your Palafin's probably going to be neutered a lot here. I think, again, when you have a Terra Torn, you're going to want to Terra that basically every week, so your Terra invests could be a little more questionable. But again, Ogre can be a spiker, but then you're also paying like 17 points for a Spikes Ogre. And then the other reason why I think this team does kind of need Torn to Terra is it is your special offense and your special breaking, so this team otherwise has to kind of overload on physical offense. But
This
overall, I think the top 6 functions very well as a team here.
this team looks like Jason drafted it, and it's actually pretty good, which means that he didn't draft it.
It is overall solid team though. Masku. Okay, so this team also another solid team. I mean, you can just tell by looking at it with the top 4 especially are great offensive and support util options, and then he has some more like niche Terra secondary Terramons, which I think when you have Terra Tusk, which is really really good, I think those Terra options are fine here and work. And then I do think the Comfey, I do always the French players with their Comfeys, they're fucking demonic as shit. And I actually don't mind the Skuntank pickup here either. I think offensively, this team just functions really well. It has so many avenues to play around. It has a lot of the util it wants. It can revenge kill, break, it can do whatever. Where I'm noticing a few of the weaknesses is your momentum can be a little limited here. It's kind of tied to Comfey, unless your Thunderous is packing momentum. So you're going to be hard switching a lot, which if this team plays bulkier, it definitely has the potential to do, but it could like hinder you on a more offensive mode. The Metagross does have to take a lot of pressure here as well. I mean, you don't really want Tusk to be rocking, so it's going to have to do that, which it's already fine with, but also it's, if any fairies cause it problems, then your team could just fall apart. It's a little scary. And then I think this is like, again, another optimization thing. Like if this team could have fit a spiker or a spin blocker, which like I get the choice not to when you have to sink a lot of points into that, but this team could have done that. But overall, solid team that I think does what it needs to do.
I guess you could say this team is the goat cha.
True. Okay, and then into another mascot pick team is Who's team, which, if you know who loves his fat drafts, and this certainly is another one of them. What made this team to me stand out to the other bulky teams was I liked the non-fat options. Like I think I like the Darkrai Lando fit here because they can very easily switch in, play early, they can break, they can be a pains in the ass on these fat teams, and I like those options more than like the stuff that Kaif and Zooch put on their teams that I think don't fit with the playstyle as well. And obviously this team is going to be AIDS as fuck to break when you have Petch, Lando, Scream, like you have some the more niche Pokemons which are cool with your Garg. The thing I noticed about this team is it is a little steel weak. You have Quack as your resist. I mean, Wishcash if that guy wants to come, but either way, they're going to get pressured by steel types, and does make that Terra typing also a little scary into this team. You do have ways to punish it. It's not the end of the world. And your just raw breaking power isn't going to be there, which again is kind of something you accept with this kind of team style. Then the other thing is the Terramons can be a little underwhelming here. Mostly, I mean, Quacklevolt definitely can function in this format. It's just we'll see. And also, this team did have obviously better removal options on the fat teams, which I think is something really useful to have. So you're not pigeonholed into boots or don't have to remove your own hazards.
This logo is awesome. This is definitely
Yeah.
my favorite logo that I put in.
Yeah, I have full confidence in who to have the ability to pilot a team like this because this is just the crux of what he plays, with some different mons splashed in.
Hooray.
Okay, so this is a team that I didn't even honestly know what to think about it when I first saw it, because obviously you see it has the Torn Zarud Terra core. I do think at the end of the day it works though. Mostly with the fact that you're just going to be terraing Zarud because it's never not really worth it to terra your Zarud here. Uh, so you're basically just paying extra for a Torn, which still functions fine here non-terra. Just not the most ideal. But defensive structure-wise, obviously this team has everything it needs. Like if you look from the top, essentially this the top 7, and even carving to an extent everything functions here, does its job. You have the removal option on the bulkier team, Allo to be at aids, you have good hazards with it, you have the right resists, you have the good spin blocker. So this team is able to play that pain in the ass bulky offense style really well. And then you have really good knockers to get rid of the boots as well. Obviously the main downside, like I mentioned before, was the Torn Zarud thing, that your Torn's gonna be non-terra a lot, and obviously when you're playing with a team like this, your immediate offensive power is not going to be the best either. Especially when you can't really. I mean, at least I don't think it's the most optimal way to play this team would be to Terra Torn, but maybe TJ will do that and we'll see. But overall, I think this team, again, one of these bulkier teams that I think is built slightly better and allows it to function a lot easier.
I didn't get to say it for the other Muck team, but Muck Tua.
Mark's Pizzeria.
This year we're celebrating 35 years in business.
Did you know we've come up with 6 all-new value combo coupons? And if you sign up for our email club, you'll save 15% off your next order too. Don't forget our best coupon. Buy a large 2-topping pizza and get a free medium cheese pizza.
It's just our way of saying thank you for making Mark's part of your family for over 35 years.
Treat you like family. Mark's Pizzeria.
Okay, moving on to number 5, which is Harris. So Harris overall has very solid and cool team, which I think is one of the only 1 Terra. It might be the only 1 Terra cap team in the league. And obviously that Terra cap is Hydrapple that you're building around. I think overall this team is just another one of those like solid core, like hazard-based teams that can play slower and play around some momentum, like slow momentum mons, through these top 8, which you have all the options you'd want. You have the good hazard setters, you have the spin blocker, you have the bulky pivots, and you have a lot of ways to win the game as well through this and potentially break revenge. That's why I have this team so high, is just because I think it's a very general good team that will give you options going into prep. Doesn't do anything crazy well, but I think in the hands of Terrace, he should be able to make some good use of it.
It sounds to me like Harris cut out the other Terra captains from their life.
True. Okay, moving on to our other slide here. Surely nothing to notice at the bottom of that screen. We have Castelia, who this season is repping Dino Crisis because Castelia still has not gotten a logo after like 3 seasons. So I chose Dino Crisis for them. So they're stuck on that team forever now. Okay, so this team I think is like starting for what I think are the premier teams of the season. So the team I think functions so well offensively. You can put on so much pressure here with the hazards, which does so many options to hazard stack, and has the knock momentum spam to just chip the opposing team down while doing that. Again, with also a premier spin blocker and Pult, this is just great. And then the Terra Captains here are so flexible, where you have like a dedicated one in Mew, where if you're bringing it, unless you're like bringing it hazard stack and playing around Gliscor, your Mew's likely going to Terra, but the other 2 can also Terra and play around setup if they want, which I think is awesome. And then this team also has really good priority options with your Pult, Cinder, Mew, Scizor, Samurai, even Arbok. That's cool. And then the team, the few of the nitpicks I have with it is that it can't remove and stack at the same time because your removal is Defog Scissor, which doesn't really want to click it, and it's Core Change with your like 4 spike stackers, including Samurott there. That's a little bit of anti-synergy. I think also I noticed this team's also one of those teams that doesn't really only has one thing off the ground, which is Gliscor. So the team is a bit pressured by grounds. And like spikes in general could be a little annoying, but I imagine that you'll boots a lot of mons here, and I don't think any of like the grounds do really get their Gliscor besides like Tusk is kind of annoying for you. And the team, this isn't like a huge thing either. I think this team's revenge killing. I mean, it's kind of, again, if your Pult isn't a good revenge kill Pult, a lot of times it's going to fall into like Scarf Samurott and maybe some of your Priority or Cinder, which overall I think the weaknesses of the team just don't really matter, and this team is going to be able to play really well offensively and pressure its opponents down while still having like good bulk and options to win. Also, fucking, if you didn't watch Castilia's week 1, the Pult benched for Servine and it was still pretty dominant, which is something certainly.
Especially when you compare to these pathetic league showings.
Facts.
Uh-oh.
Get those numbers up. We have a Dark Seal when we're going 1-5. Come on. Okay, that moves us on to Lucas, which is the other Pult team, which you'll notice definitely some similarities beyond the fact that they do have the two of the same mons. I think Lucas's team just built the structure slightly better. And the reasoning why I say that is I think I look at this roster and I think there's also, again, more roster flexibility here. Castilia's was kind of the main 6, and then Diancie for certain matchup fish. This team, I think, has a 7 that I can play around with Swalot for like specific matchups. But again, this team's offense, I think, immediately, like, it has more clearer offensive options with a Nam and Ogre that can immediately pressure a bit better, but also still have setup like Castilia's do. So there's that, and then this team again can still play around the hazards itself. And I think that's why I rate this team slightly higher. I think it's just probably easier to pilot and more straightforward in the way that it can play, but it also still has layers to it. And yeah, there's just, again, another solid team that I didn't really also spot anything glaringly that I saw as a weakness to this team was another big thing. And I think Lucas will hopefully be able to use as well. My goat.
The best lead in Draft League.
True. Okay, this to me is, again, moving into like probably the maybe premier 3 teams, if not 2, is Money Guy's team. At first, again, I wasn't expecting this team to end up this high, but when I looked at it more, I was just like, this team is so well-rounded and it basically does everything. It has everything. So you have lots of good win cons and setup options through your Zarude, your Gren, stuff like that. And then, again, your breaking options are good. Again, maybe a little lacking on the physical side because it's mostly Zarude if you're not flexing certain mons physical. But you have the options to break, and you have options to play the pivot momentum game. You have so many hazard options. You have the revenge killers. Like, this team, to me, just I think can function really well in a more offensive meta, but also still have all the tools to break a lot of these bulkier teams and play around them. There were a few things to me that made this team not number 1, which, again, the number 1 team, if you can count, you'll figure out who it is, but this team does struggle a bit with grounds, mostly depending on Zarude's Terra typing. So if Zarude Terra's out of like something that can deal with grounds, it's kind of relying on Lando, which isn't the most reliable way to deal with grounds. And then your spin blocker being Chandelure, I think, could be slightly better. It can work, just not the most ideal. But overall, I think this is another team that just functions well and will be able to be flexible in how it plays, who it plays around.
I guess you could call it one of the Primarina teams of this Draft League.
Okay, that moves us on to number 1. I think this team is just the most cohesive, well-rounded team in the league at the end of the day. So the team has like actually disgusting hazards momentum between its top 3. Obviously, like all these mons have hazards of momentum essentially, and they cover each other well. And and what else is there on this team? Sorry. The amount of win cons, breaking options, revenge killers, this team is just so flexible in how it's going to be able to utilize its mons from matchup to matchup, but they're almost always going to be useful, and it has that flexibility as well. Yeah, honestly, the main thing that when it came to this team is I didn't really have anything negative to say about it because I just think it's a really well constructed, put together team by Joshua that I think this is the kind of team that I know he'll be able to pilot too, which doesn't really factor into the rankings, but I think this team has everything it could ever want at the end of the day, which is what you're looking for in a team.
Okay, I have 6 things to say about this team. It's the grand finale. It's clobbering time. Born again. Bring on the chaos. Ledge and Dairy. Hulk
Well-
smash.
If you know whose Marvel Rival salts those are, good for you. Also, yeah, Yurdunk loves Terra P2. There's that. But yeah. Okay, these are the overall rankings. If you weren't like keeping track, they're in order, and then thumbs up emoji. My bad if I waffled at any point. These also should probably mention at the start. These are my opinions and my opinions alone. If I think your
didn't
team
help.
is shit, it doesn't mean anything. Again, I don't think there's any like complete dog shit teams. There are some kind of bad ones, but I think everyone here has the ability to do well, and peers don't mean jack at the end of the day, especially coming from me. So I hope you enjoyed them and maybe learned something about your team or your opposing teams, or you found a good laugh, had some fun. But
Please don't drop out of the league because you got last in PRs.
I know Spoink won't do that, so I'm not worried.
Spoink, please. I know it's rough to be at the bottom of the PRs, but please don't drop out. I promise. It's not my fault.
Okay.
Please.
Anyways, I'm sure people will enjoy that this is not an hour-long PR video. I don't know if we're gonna do timestamps or anything, but probably won't need them. So thanks for watching.